open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. It's the 26th of September 2001, and this is UCY.tv with the Solvinur event. Today I have a recording from a caller 2 weeks ago, Chris. It's not that long, won't last for 2 hours, it's like 77 minutes or so. I hope the sound will be okay. If not, please let me know in the chat room. There's a couple of people there. Atox, Hopper, Jules, Mama Delight, and Vince. Welcome everybody. And also to Alons. Hello. So let me know if the sound is not okay. Let's see what we can do here. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur event. It's the 18th of September, and this means it's not a Saturday because I have a recording now with Chris, and we're going to talk about nonviolent communication. Welcome, Chris. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you, Walter?
Well, actually, I'm not so good, but I'm a bit absent, so to speak. There's got a lot of things on my mind, and it's been bugging me a bit, but usually when I do interviews, all of that just poof goes away, and I'm ready to go. Yeah.
I understand. Do you need some time to decompress, or do you want to dive into the interview?
No. We can just dive into this. I think it's so much better to have this Skype conversation. I had a lot of trouble hearing what you said last time when you called into the radio show.
Yes. The audio quality on cell phones is very low, especially in the United States. I don't know that it's that way around the world, but the telecom industry has really, really poor quality on cell phone calls, and it doesn't need to be that way. I'm not sure why they're in the Stone Ages, but at any rate, we now have much better quality via the internet and this wonderful Skype tool.
Yeah, it's a good tool. Yeah, my cell phone here from the Netherlands, speaking to other people, it's good. It's even much better than the line telephones we used to have in the old days, right? In the Stone Age. Yeah, it's even got better quality than that. So yeah, maybe it's the United States that's lagging behind. All right, so could you give us your website so that people can check out what you do and what's more over there?
Sure. The easiest way to find me is to just search for my podcast. And that if you just search for Choice Conversations, probably the whole first page of links that come up will be to me. My website, it's choiceconversations.libsyn.com. So that's Libsyn. But like I said, it's just easier to search for Choice Conversations. And I try to put out a show a week, and I cover a variety of topics. I cover a little bit of politics, psychology, relationships, do a lot of discussion about parenting and the like, and just try to have an interesting and entertaining conversation, and I have a lot of fun with it.
All right, so it's not only about nonviolent communications then?
Oh, no, not at all. Nonviolent communication is one tool in my tool belt.
Yeah. So when you discuss politics, is it like about the left-right paradigm?
Well, I'm not sure where exactly you lean from, but I'm actually more of a voluntarist. So in general, I'm more talking about how neither left nor right is what we want. What we want is less violence in our life, less coercion, and the more peace and cooperation and negotiation we have, the more prosperous the world will be, the more beautiful the world will be. And just talking about what that looks like, and and when looking at politics, it's basically identifying what they're doing wrong, pointing out the violence involved and the like. So an example of that would be, I was at the dinner table with my family last night, and my daughter, we were talking about smoking and how, it's not good for you. And my daughter was shocked to find out that it wasn't illegal to smoke. And this being tobacco, of course. Yeah. And we said, no, it's legal. And she said, well, that should be illegal. And I said to her, well, why do you say that? And she said, well, because people hurt themselves when they smoke. Yeah. And I said, okay, so if somebody was smoking, how would you stop that? And she knows that whenever you say, you're asking the government to do something, what you're really saying is, please use guns to enforce this. Please use violence, the threat of violence, and throwing someone in a cage. Yeah. To do this. So I said, so if someone's smoking and you want them to stop, how would you get them to do that? And she's like, oh, I wouldn't use guns, Dad. I would maybe we could freeze their credit accounts. They wouldn't be able to use their credit. What? And I said, all right. So I said, okay. So how are you? Somebody has been smoking. You found out about it. You want to freeze their credit accounts. I'm somebody that provides credit, and I'm willing to give them credit. What are you going to do to stop it? And I said, she's like, that's a good question. I said, you need to realize, sweetheart, whenever you ask the government to do something, what you're doing is you're saying, please take a gun and point it at someone to get them to stop doing it. And I personally, while I think it would be great if people stopped smoking, I am absolutely not willing to point guns at people to tell them they can't smoke. Yeah. So those are the kind of discussions that I have with people, things I talk about on my podcast and the like when it comes to politics. Yeah. The first time I got into contact with the term voluntarist was via a book about anarchism. Are you leaning more towards anarchism then? Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of voluntarism is versus the anarchism, what the differences are. I was just having this discussion yesterday with another podcaster, a Liberty podcaster, Wes Bertrand, and he was telling me that the main difference between anarchism and voluntarism is anarchists still view working towards freedom as something that it's acceptable to do it within the status paradigm. For example, an anarchist would see it as completely legitimate to go vote for a libertarian politician, where a voluntarist says the government has no authority and I am not going to grant it legitimacy by even voting. I am going to act like it's not there to the best of my ability. Yeah. And that's how I'm going to live my life. So I don't know. I mean, I had not really realized there was much of a distinction between the two terms until I was having this discussion yesterday. What do you view as the differences between the two? Yeah. Yeah, I found that book, I can't remember the author's name now, but I found it pretty compelling, especially the fallacy of authority that they claim. It's the most strong argument for that was that if I don't have the right to do something and you don't have the right to do something, how come people in government have the right to do something? Right? Sure. So that was, where did they get that right from? That was a stunning question. It's like,
they should have the same rights as we do, right?
Absolutely.
But they seem to have much more of it, and they use violence to use it. So that's kind of crooked in my view.
Sure.
All right. Other things you mentioned besides politics was?
Well, relationships is one I talk about often, be that the child-parent relationship is a common one, or just relationships with your friends or your spouse. And this is where nonviolent communication is something that creeps into the conversation often, as it's an excellent tool for connecting with others and doing it, having your communication in a peaceful way rather than in an authoritarian way. You know, traditionally in a child-parent relationship, and often like in an employer-subordinate relationship, an employer-employee relationship, and even sadly in relationships where people are supposed to be more peers, like marriages and the like, you'll still see where one is dominant, one is the authority. You hear expressions like, you know, oh, she wears the pants in that house,
et
cetera.
Yeah.
So it's still, you know, one of the things tying all of these different things I talk about together is freedom or lack of freedom and this authoritarian, this domination paradigm that's out there. So we have domination in the way we organize our society at the government level because we still have domination at the personal level. So it's very normal to us to accept having these rulers that rule over us, because from the very moment we were born, we had rulers that ruled over us, these authoritarian parents. So nonviolent communication is an attempt to break that at the interpersonal level and say, you know what, if we really believe that negotiation and peace are superior ways of working at the community level, at organizing society, at the societal level, surely it also is a better way to work at the interpersonal level. And how can we get there? And what we've discovered, I should say, what people that that use nonviolent communication and the author of nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, what he discovered is that the way most people communicate is actually still in that authoritarian domination win-lose paradigm. And so Marshall Rosenberg developed nonviolent communication as an attempt to be more aware of our language in using win-win language and respecting the other person as an equal and trying to connect with them rather than to dominate them.
Yeah. The authoritarian idea, I don't know exactly where it comes from. In our history, we could go back to the Hammurabi Code, for instance. And in Indian mythology, quote-unquote, there's also, goes back thousands of years, and they're already talking about government. I think it may stem from our even more ancient past, where we were in groups, and there was always an alpha male there. You can see that even in monkeys nowadays, right?
Sure.
And so, now the authoritarian idea is rooted very deeply, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that came to my mind while you were speaking is that while we, within our relations, or even children at school or children with parents, have this idea of authority which makes the whole world authoritarian. I'm not sure I follow that, because the authority comes from, for instance, things like the United Nations, the European Union with their European Commission, and they set up the rules, they make the laws. And I don't think it's the normal people that create this authority, or am I missing the point now completely?
So, Walter, when you're bringing up anarchism or voluntarism with just the average person on the street, what is their response to that?
They say, well, we must have a leader. I've had these conversations at my work also. They're very dependent on somebody telling them what to do.
So that's right there is what I'm getting at. The reason why government is accepted, why there's not just revolt, because the rulers are very, very small. They're a very, very small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
And they only rule by the consent of the ruled. If the people did not allow themselves to be ruled, they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So, if you came out and said, this is ridiculous that there's one set of rules for us and a different set of rules for them. They're allowed to take our money, but we're not allowed. If we take their money, then it's stealing. They call it taxes, but and the like. There's all these rules that are if we print money, it's counterfeiting, but for them, they're just allowed to do it. It's quantitative easing or whatever.
Yeah.
So the rules apply to us, but it doesn't apply to them. If we came out and said, okay, we just need to get rid of them, they don't even need to address us. The people around us will shoot us down. Like if you're at a town hall meeting saying, this is kind of ridiculous that we even have this local government, we should just get rid of it. The town council doesn't even need to defend itself because all the people in the crowd around will defend them and say, okay, that's crazy talk. We need rulers. So this is what I'm getting at when I say that it's because it's culturally accepted that domination is a valid, is a useful, healthy form, even though people I don't think at the conscious level they really think about this. Mm-hmm. But it's very clear that this is what they do because you see it in all of the institutions in our society. Well, I shouldn't say all, but in many of the institutions, with the most important being the family, because that's what you're exposed to during your formative years. Yeah. And then for you, it's just normal when you go to a school and the teacher is dominating the people in the class, or on the playground and a bully is dominating the kids. This feels very natural to you because you're used to being bullied at home. It's just not called bullying when a parent does it. But it's exactly the same thing. And then when you see, actually the whole world runs this way, that there's, these politicians and presidents and the like, that they dominate and they use force to do it. Yeah. It seems very natural to you because that's how your whole world has been the whole time. So that's where I say the government is just an outgrowth of the family structure. Yeah. So the society around you, the schooling system is set up that way because the family is set up that way. Religions often have this authoritarian feel to them, where there's the God is like an authoritarian parent that punishes bad little boys and girls and rewards good little boys and girls, just as the parents would. So that all of these institutions in society are reflections of this domination thinking.
Yeah, I get your point. It's by our consent that this all happens. So is then nonviolent communication a way to break this idea of authority?
I think so. It's one tool that can be used, and it's very effective. I mean, for some people anyway. A lot of people try to use it and fail.
Oh, okay.
So it's, for some people it works, for some people it doesn't.
Uh-huh.
The whole concept behind nonviolent communication is to remove domination from it and to remove a win-lose. Because, when you're in a domination setting, when a parent and a child are arguing, the parent's like, you're going to pick up your clothes off the floor right now, or you're going to have to go to your room for the rest of the night, or whatever. You're not getting dessert, or you're getting spanked, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the child's like fighting back, whatever, throwing a fit. That's a win-lose scenario. They're both fighting so hard to win, because if they don't win, they lose. Mm-hmm. And nonviolent communication rejects that principle that we have to resort to win-lose scenarios. Let's see if there isn't a win-win scenario that we can come to, where we come out of it and we both feel better. Yeah. So it's really trying to find win-win solutions. And if you really allow yourself to fully integrate this and start thinking in nonviolent communication, not just the words coming out of your mouth, but your thoughts in your head are actually using the language of love and connection of win-win scenarios rather than of domination and win-lose.
Yeah.
If you could do that, it really does transform the world around you, at least the world around you where you have influence, like your the relationships around you, your family and the like. It can remove that tension and that domination that's there, and people start living together peacefully, and a lot of beautiful things can come out of that. Happiness and joy and connection with those around you can really flourish then.
So when we try to look at it from a win-win situation, I guess the term needs comes into play?
Right. So Marshall Rosenberg said, when you're evaluating a situation, it is better to look at it from a needs standpoint. How are needs being met right now, or how are needs not being met? And he says that needs are universal if you get to the root, not the surface needs, but the root needs. He'd say things at the surface are strategies, where strategies vary. People get very much at odds with each other. There's very much into these win-lose negotiations when they're fighting over different strategies. When really, if they get down to the root needs are universal, and there are no conflicts at the needs level because they're all universal. So
yeah. Okay. So everybody's needs are more or less the same.
Right. So when he says universal needs, these are things like biological needs, of course, food, water, sleep, etc., shelter. But then psychological needs, so connection, understanding, things like peace and harmony are needs that people have. To be respected, these are needs people have. So often, someone their need for respect might not be getting met when you're in an argument with them.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, well, how can we meet that need for respect while also meeting what my needs are and the like? So that comes up often in these various relationships.
Yeah. So when we look at, for instance, the Palestinian-Israeli question or debacle or whatever you want to call it, it seems like I heard this interview on a radio station where a very old man, Palestinian, was interviewed about the time before their land was invaded, as they say, right? And he said that he was getting along very well with all the people over there, no matter if they were Jewish or whatever, it didn't matter. And then all of a sudden, there was this animosity between Jews and non-Jews. And I don't think it's because all of a sudden all the Jews started hating any other kind of people that were there, but it had more to do with the political change that happened, right? What was it, 1948, I guess, when Israel was created? And so how can nonviolent communication be used there to make a more peaceful situation there?
Sure. So Marshall Rosenberg, he actually had traveled to Palestine and sat down with the leaders there. And he's gone to many war-torn areas. He has passed away just this year, actually. So, but in the past, he had gone to many war-torn areas and negotiated between people at war and the like, and had great success.
Okay.
The areas where he maybe didn't have long-lasting success is when he would get them to negotiate and talk peacefully while he was there.
Yeah.
And as the mediator of the conversation, as he would translate what they were saying in nonviolent communication. One side would say something, he'd say, so what you're saying is this, and he would translate it into nonviolent communication. And then the other side would, back and forth, he would translate it into nonviolent communication. And they would really feel good and be like, wow, if we could learn to talk like this to each other, we wouldn't have to keep killing each other if we could learn to talk this way.
Yeah.
But then when he's gone, very quickly what is familiar comes back, and they forget to talk that way, and and then they're back butting heads again. So
yeah, interesting.
so right, it's if you don't adapt it and keep using it, it's definitely not a panacea. One of the ways I like to look at it is, really like a language. There's, you have a native language that you were born speaking, and then you can learn other languages as you, as you develop in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to learn Japanese and you're surrounded by people that all they speak is English, and so whenever you're speaking with them, you're trying to speak Japanese, and all the time they're speaking back to you in English, it's going to be hard for you to ever become really fluent in Japanese.
Mm-hmm. So
when one person coming in and just trying to mediate between two parties without getting them to, I don't know, in a scenario like that, when then you leave and they're just back at each other's throats, I'm not sure that they never got the chance to become fluent in NVC.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at those levels, at the government level, I'm quite sure it can be helpful, but where the average person is going to find value in this is being able to improve their marriage, improve their relationship with their girlfriend or boyfriend, to have a better relationship with their children, a better relationship at work with their coworkers, their boss, their subordinates, and the like. In those relationships where you have a lot of power, where you have a lot of influence, is probably a better term of saying, where you have influence, that's where you're going to really find a lot of value with NVC. Yeah. At the political level, I find that you have almost no influence. And so you could use NVC and have just as little effect as if you used regular communication.
Yeah.
Because you just have no influence at that level.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the key terms I mentioned was need, right? What are some other key terms that you come into contact with when studying nonviolent communication?
Sure. So one of the things that they talk about is they call it OFNR, and the N part of OFNR is needs. Another part of it is observations.
Okay.
So observations, what Marshall Rosenberg would call that is, he says, anything that a video camera would capture. So it's kind of removing your interpretation of the scenario and just stating what you actually saw, what your senses could take in.
Yeah.
So an example of that is, say your child comes through the door, they take their coat off and they throw it on the floor. And the observation would be, hey, little Johnny, I saw you just walk through the door a minute ago. You took your coat off and dropped it on the floor.
Yeah.
That's an observation. Now, what would be your interpretation of it would be, Johnny, you came in the door, and just to piss me off, because I hate it when you do this, you threw your jacket on the floor. I've told you that a million times, and you did that to intentionally.
Yeah.
To get me riled. You did. You saw me standing there watching you, and it's like, well, you don't really know what was going on through their head. You're just interpreting a bunch of stuff, putting on it. So he says, let's remove that. Suppress. Be like, you know what? I don't know for sure that was intentional. So let's remove that and try to, what's the end goal here? The end goal is to live peacefully and have a rich relationship with my child. So let's remove that and let's just look at the observation. The observation is just what a camera would see. The camera wouldn't see that was intentionally done to piss me off, So that's observations.
So it removes kind of the emotional value, I guess.
Well, I would say what it's removing is maybe diagnosing the situation. So you're trying to figure out and analyze what happened, judging the situation, and looking for more there. Now, maybe it is true that it was done intentionally, but speaking that language is not going to help you to connect with the child in that scenario. So it's like, okay, we'll just stick to observations. So then the next component would be...
Hold on.
Sure.
So dig a little deeper into this observation. I can understand that when you say the example of the child, right? But is it also useful for yourself, for one's self, when you observe the more bigger things in life, like the political decisions that are being made? Is it possible to use it there as well?
Well, I think it can help you to analyze the situation. I guess maybe could you give me an example?
Well, for instance, this is maybe a bad example, but it springs to my mind. Before January 2015, we had a law here in the Netherlands, and it stated that if there's something wrong with you, like for instance you're missing a leg, or you can't use your hands very well, or you've got a psychological problem, then there is a space for you at the social workplace, and you can get a job regardless of what's wrong with you. And I thought that was a very good initiative because, you know, a lot of people that like miss a leg, for instance, they can be very motivated to work. And these people should be able to work if that's possible at all, right? And now they've removed that law, and they came up with a new law called the participation law. And now the counties are responsible for getting people a job regardless of the fact if you are disabled in any way or form. And so now people that are not very motivated to work because the social securities here are very high, you'd have to work at least like 4 days a week to get more money than somebody who's on the dole and doesn't do a thing. And so, you know, there will be a lot of struggles because, you know, those people aren't motivated to work. And now the county government comes to them and says, well, we found a job for you. And it's going to lead to a lot of distress. And people are going to say, no, I don't want to do that job. And they might lose their social security because of it. It's all not very nice also for the people that have disabilities, because longer say, well, look at my hands are broken, I can't use both of my hands, and you know, there used to be a law that safeguarded me from doing jobs that I can't do, but now, you know, those laws don't exist anymore. So the people that are disabled are less protected in this way. So, you know, I don't think that's a good idea. Is there a way that I can observe this, so to speak, without being judgmental? How does that work in NVC?
Well, in NVC, you don't necessarily remove judgment. You remove moral judgment. Okay. This would be like, that is evil or good. That is...
Okay.
It's more of, you look at it from a needs-based judgment.
Yeah.
So you would say, in this scenario, I guess I will. Let me see if I can use nonviolent communication to talk to you about your feelings for that. Mm-hmm. So Walter, when you told me about this law that just recently passed,
yeah,
I sensed some distress from you because you're really concerned about the well-being of the people in your country.
Yeah.
And then I guess one of the ways, the OFNR, one of the things that the R is for requests. You can make a request at the end.
Yeah.
And is there anything I could do to help out? So that would be like the request to follow it up. So there, what I'm doing is I did the observation, which was when you told me about this law, rather than saying, like bringing political views into it and being like, well, when you were critical of of that party, you know, when you were really showing your party colors there, complaining about that law, you know, that sort of thing. Just kind of remove all of that and just be like, look, you were telling me about the changes in the law. That will be the observation. A video camera could capture you telling me about the changes in the law. So that's where the observations come in.
Okay.
I sense some distress or concern. You know, this is where that would be the feelings part of OFNR. F for feelings.
Okay.
Was, you know, you're really concerned about the needs, the well-being of the people, specifically the needs, the well-being of those with handicaps.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, close it out with, you know, first of all, I'd say is that correct? Because you never want, in NVC, you don't want to necessarily assume that you're right. You're trying to find out what the truth of the matter is.
Yeah, well, it's...
So you'd be like, is that true? And if so, is there anything I can do to help you?
Well, it's partially true. It's, I found that, I've done a lot of jobs in my life, right? And, usually, my, stupid phone. Let's see. Mio, I'm doing a live interview right now. Can you call back later?
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye. When I was doing normal work, I found that people weren't very motivated to work. And now that I'm working with people that have a disability, I find that they are very motivated to work. And my problem is with the fact that these handicapped, very motivated people are now no longer able to call on this law and, you know, say, well, I'm supposed to get a job, but you're supposed to, uitrekening mee, that's Dutch. You're supposed to, how do I translate that? Take into account the fact that I'm handicapped. Right? And so now the counties no longer have to do that. And so I'm worried about these people that they will get stuck in jobs where they don't like, you know, and their motivations will drop. And all in all, that's just bad for the country in itself, right? So it's the motivated people that I'm worried about.
So those would be, I would say the need would be probably at the connection level. You want these people to be understood, their situation, and respected, and there to be consideration for them, and you know that if they're put in the right position, they can really flourish.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and you want that for them.
Yep.
Right. Right. So one of the main things that NVC gives you is it's a great tool for empathizing with another person.
Okay.
So when someone's talking to you about they're concerned about this or whatever, you can empathize with them. And empathy is a need in itself that we all have. We all need to be heard and understood and empathized with. And so this gives you the tools to do that. And then a lot of times, once you empathize with someone, they are then willing to listen to you because you've listened to them. And then they're willing to listen to you and hear about how maybe your needs aren't getting met. And then together you can talk about what's the win-win scenario here. So in that scenario where you're just talking about it, you know, again, I don't know what can be gained at the political level. That in my experience, that's beyond the influence of most people, unless you've got really deep pockets and you're a lobbyist.
Yeah.
And even then, I don't know. How effective that's going to be at really changing things in the world. I'm a voluntarist. I'm not a believer in using the government to change things. But when you're talking to the people around you, so if someone's talking about this and they're concerned about it, or someone who's talking about this and they're for it, and you're not, you can try to empathize with them and understand, okay, what is the need that is driving their support for this?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to know if there was a way to observe this without getting emotional about it.
So I would say that NVC, it's not necessarily about suppressing emotions. In fact, it can be, for people that have suppressed their emotions, it can be a really great way of getting in touch with your emotions and your feelings. Help you to keep emotions at more of a level where you don't overreact, where you still have the choice of how you would want to react in a more reasonable manner.
Yeah.
You know, where if your emotion levels become really high, really elevated, you often, the part of your brain that's the logical reasoning part of it might get overridden, and you're acting purely on emotion and less on reason, and you might do some things that after the fact you regret. Where this, I find anyway, that if you can think in NVC and speak in NVC, it helps to keep your emotion levels at a more smooth level. There's more equilibrium, emotional equilibrium. And then you then have the choice of how you wish to respond. So that's one of the reasons why I named my show Choice Conversations, is hopefully the things that we discuss inside the psychology, nonviolent communication, self-knowledge, and various other things, that hopefully these help you to create more choice in your life, which is just another way of saying to create more freedom in your life. Because if you don't have any choices, then that's lack of freedom, right?
Yeah.
You know, a man in a cage has very little choices.
Yeah.
So the more we can create choice in your life, even at just like the personal level and your personal relationships around you, the more freedom you can bring into your life.
Yeah. All right. So much for observation, I guess. What was the next one? Feeling? Sure.
So feeling is definitely something that you don't want to ignore in nonviolent communication. Feelings are very powerful indicators of whether your needs are being met or they're not being met. So if you have feelings that you have when your needs are not being met are things like anger, frustration, sadness, etc. Humiliation. These are things when your needs are not being met, and they tell you very quickly. A feeling is a great way to really quickly know, hey, you know what? I have a need that's not being met here. Okay. What is that? And then you can dig into that and try to find it and rectify that situation.
Okay.
And then there's feelings that tell you when your needs are being met. You know, joy, happiness. There's many of them. Let me think here. You know, I'm
gratification.
But gratification, appreciation, and so on. There are many more, but those also could be like, you know what, I'm in a really good place right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to ignore feelings, and that's one of them. And it's good to openly acknowledge those feelings.
Yeah.
Now, so that's nonviolent communication, is like, let's not pretend that the feelings aren't there. Let's talk about them.
Okay.
So it's bringing that into the conversation. So that's one of them. So OFN are observations, feelings, needs, and then the last piece is a request.
Yeah.
So in very big difference is there are no demands in nonviolent communication. There are only requests.
Okay. Yeah. So.
And it's Marshall says the way you know whether it was a demand or a request, because sometimes you'll say things that appear to be a request, but they're really a demand.
Okay.
So, like, for example, your child comes through the door, throws his jacket on the ground. Hey, Johnny, would you please pick up your jacket? That sounds like a request, right?
Yes.
You only know whether it was a request or a demand if the person doesn't follow your request. So if they say, no, it's all right, I'm going to leave it there, and you're like, pick that up right now, or you're going straight to your room, then you know it was really a demand.
Yeah.
So that it's one of those things where if it really is a demand, I think it's like disingenuous to make it as a request.
Yeah.
But know that you're not speaking nonviolent communication if you are making demands. So in nonviolent communication, now it doesn't mean that you make a request and they say no, that the conversation ends there. You can continue talking and negotiating and the like.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that I think scares people about nonviolent communication. They're like, well, if I make a request and the person says no, then what do I do? And they're like, then you're just screwed. It's like, well, no, not exactly. It's not the end at that point.
Okay.
So in the way to, this comes up in parenting all the time because people are really locked into win-lose scenarios in parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And what I say to them is, think about it as if you didn't have the power to make them. Think about it as if maybe this was a coworker or a client, and you made a request to them and they said no. What would you do? Would you say to your client, well, you're damn well going to do that, or you're not getting dessert tonight?
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't do that. You'd be like, all of a sudden, oh, well, I guess I'm just shit out of luck. No, you would find other ways to negotiate and talk to them. The conversation wouldn't end right there. But people in parenting, they get their eyes like kind of glaze over. They're like, well, if they say no, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I can't. This isn't going to work. So it's something that takes getting used to for sure, because people aren't used to speaking this way, especially in certain relationships in their life where domination has been the rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So does that mean, I guess the answer is no, but does that mean that people should no longer demand things? Or can one still have demands? I guess not, right?
Oh, I think I had it on mute, sorry. I guess if you're going to speak nonviolent communication, you need to remove demands. Now, that doesn't mean that people can just walk all over you. So one of the people that has done a lot of work on nonviolent communication, and somebody who's a friend of mine, has been on my show many times, is Daryl Becker.
Okay.
And he made a really important contribution to nonviolent communication, was to say, you know what, that doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries.
Okay. So
just because you're somebody who uses nonviolent communication and you don't make demands, it doesn't mean that you don't have any boundaries. So you can state, there are certain boundaries. There are certain things you're not allowed to cross. If you do, there will be consequences for that. So just let you know that right now. So the difference being in nonviolent communication, you want your boundaries to be very explicitly declared, and the consequences for violating those boundaries to be explicitly declared, where people have boundaries, and people that are not using nonviolent communication have boundaries, and they're very rarely declared. And when people step over them, they're like, you see, like, there's maybe they react with anger, maybe they don't say anything, but they start becoming passive aggressive with you, like, and you're not sure why they're acting this way, or where with nonviolent communication, it attempts to be much more honest than that. And let's be really honest, and let's be, let's work together so that we're both happy.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have these boundaries, I'm not going to be happy if you're crossing these boundaries, so I want you to know they're there so that we can get along peacefully.
Yeah. Okay. Daryl Becker, I heard that name before, and the website is voluntaryvisions.com. Is that
correct?
Yeah, I've heard about him with regard to the Trivium, if I'm not mistaken. Did he talk to you about that?
Yes, we had a conversation on my podcast where one of the things Daryl Becker has done is to try to look at the language, nonviolent communication, through the lens of the Trivium.
Uh-huh.
So, because he really is a big proponent of the Trivium as a method for learning. And he says you can use the Trivium to learn and hone your NVC skills.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. And so what would be the grammar part of nonviolent communication?
Well, the grammar part would be, I would say, the OFNR, understanding those pieces, and the various terms that can be used.
Yeah.
You know, so there is a wonderful tool, a wonderful web page on the Center for Nonviolent Communications website, where it's called cnbc.org. But if you go there, or if you just do a search for needs inventory, NVC needs inventory, you see a long list of all the different needs that are out there.
Okay.
And likewise, they have a feelings inventory that can help you to expand your vocabulary for feelings.
Yeah.
You know, so that you're saying more than I feel good or I feel bad. You know, you can really look at it, you know, get into the more subtleties of the different feelings you could have.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are all part of the grammar.
Yeah.
And
I guess the understanding would tie a bit to self-knowledge, right?
I'm sorry, come again?
I guess the understanding part, or logic, whatever term you want to use, is more tied to the self-knowledge part of what you talk about on your radio, correct?
I think that's probably a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would use the logic part of the Trivium and relate it to NVC would be for the rules of how you implement the grammar.
Okay.
So, you know, the rules would be things like not using the 4Ds of disconnected communication, something we haven't talked about today. I know we talked about it the last time I was on your show.
Yeah, we could do a little recap, I think.
Sure. And things like the rules would be things like not making demands. You know, demands would be one of those 4Ds, and instead making requests. And the way you know it's a request, again, because a demand can be disguised as a request, is when they say what happens when the request isn't followed. So I would say those are some of the rules that would fall under the logic component. So, you know, if a person comes back and doesn't honor your request, you can then try to dig deeper and empathize with them and really say, okay, I see that I asked you to pick up your jacket and you didn't. And you might talk about your own OFNR at that point. You know, you can identify theirs, or you can talk about your own and say, when you didn't do that, I felt a little angry because we have, you know, my needs for having a peaceful home, for having a space where I can live and work that's not cluttered, that's very distracting to me, isn't being met.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm wondering if maybe you could sit down and talk to me about how we could resolve this, because we have to share this house together. And I don't want to be angry with you. You know, I want us to get along well. How can we share this house together where you're able to use it the way you want to use it, and I'm still able to have an environment where there's not a lot of clutter and I can think clearly, and, you know, because I work from home and I need an environment where I'm not distracted. So that would be kind of an example of the logic is, okay, how do you follow, what do you do? How do you implement it?
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say that. And I guess that might be the rhetoric as well.
It's also the rhetoric, yes.
Right. I'm not an expert on applying the Trivium to it. Daryl is somebody that he could talk to you about that in depth. I don't. The time zones may not line up too well because he's in Hawaii with you in the Netherlands. But I also, if you go to Choice Conversations and search for Daryl Becker, or just Becker, or the Trivium and the like, you could see the work that I've done with Daryl on that. And he goes into much more detail and speaks much more clearly about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what you said is the word how. right? How do you use those rules? And that's indeed rhetoric, but you can only say how to use the rules if you understand them, right? If you get the logic behind it. So these 4 Ds, one of them was disconnect, right?
No, they're the 4 Ds of disconnection, but they are diagnosis, denial of responsibility, demands, and deserve-oriented language.
Yeah, the diagnosis, that ties back to the camera, making pictures, right?
Oh, yes, I would say, so this would be like judging, labeling, or criticizing. So, an example, you're lazy and you only care about yourself. It's like, well, what the camera would say is, the observation would be, I saw when you got home from work, you walked right by the sink full of dishes and sat down on the couch. Where the diagnosis would be, you're lazy and you don't care about me, that sort of thing.
So it would be allowed to think that, but not to say it. Is that correct?
Well, sure. I mean, your thoughts are going to come. You're not going to be able to stop thoughts. I mean, you have some ability to control your thoughts for sure, but when you think that, one of the things you can do is translate it to NVC in your mind. Say, okay, I just had that thought, but how would I translate that to NVC? And you don't have to speak it. Yeah. It's actually one of the most powerful uses of nonviolent communication that really wasn't emphasized by Marshall Rosenberg. What is just thinking in nonviolent communication. When you have a thought, say, okay, I'm really pissed right now, or I'm really sad, or whatever it is, stopping that train of thought, and say, okay, wait a minute, how can I say that in NVC? What are the needs not being met here?
Yeah.
And then you're put in a place where you have the state of mind where you could be much more effective at actually resolving the situation and getting your needs met. Yeah. Where if you continue down that road where you're angry or you're sad or whatever it is, you're anxious, you're going to be less effective at actually getting your need met.
This sounds more like a spiritual use of the NVC, just for yourself, right?
Well, I guess, what do you mean by that?
Well, it reminds me of things like meditation, control of your own mental state.
Sure, yeah, and that meaning of spiritual, absolutely. It could be a tool to help you to keep that emotional equilibrium, which is, one of the things that meditation is really great at doing.
Yeah, I'm sorry for using the word spiritual. I talk a lot about it on my show, but it's usually tied to the more dogmatic view that religious people hold it.
Sure.
Yeah, not meaning it that way.
Right. Yes, I'm very spiritual in the sense of connecting with myself and self-awareness and meditating and creating that space between stimulus and response. Creating choice. I mean, that's essentially the whole premise behind my show, Choice Conversations, is to create choice, to put between stimulus and response, just to rather be a robot. When somebody comes in and pushes your buttons, you automatically respond. Put a space in there to allow yourself to make a choice how you respond.
Yeah, that was a quote from somebody, that there is a space between stimulus and response, right?
Right. Yeah, I know Richard Grove talks about it all the time he quotes that all the time on Tragedy and Hope.
Oh, very good. I'm going to have him on also somewhere in the future.
Oh, great. Yeah, he's a great guy. I've had conversations with him in the past, and his work is excellent
absolutely.
As you know.
Yeah. So we had 1D. What's the next?
So there's denial of responsibility. So this is like trying to figure out who is to blame, denial of there being a choice in blaming. So this would be like, well, I have to do what my boss says, denying that you have the choice there. Or, you made me do this, blaming you for it.
Yeah, a lot in relationships, right? You made me do this. You made me throw the ashtray. You.
Sure. Or even just your emotions. You made me angry.
Yeah.
And it's in nonviolent communication. it's very important to take responsibility for your own thoughts, actions, and feelings even. The feelings is the one that people balk at more. The ones like actions and thoughts, it's a little easier for people like, sure, okay, if I threw the ashtray, once I've calmed down, if I threw the ashtray, I realize you didn't actually grab my hand, force it on the ashtray, and make me throw it. I have to own that.
Yeah.
Maybe in the heat of the moment, they're not willing to do that, but after they calm down, they're like, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm responsible for my actions. But the emotions part, they're like, but no. You made me angry.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, but it's very disabling to say other people have that power to control your emotions.
Yeah.
And it's very enabling and very empowering to say, you know what? Those people don't have the power to pull my strings that way.
Yeah.
I have power over this, and that means I can change it if I want.
Yeah, I've heard this back from a Dutch old radio host. He calls himself an expert in what he calls mirrorology, and he also said that, well, if somebody makes you angry, that means you've given away the power, right? You're not keeping the power to yourself. I guess that's the same thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So don't deny responsibility. What's the next one?
So then there's deserve-oriented language.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Right. So what this means, it's basically around rewards and punishment and moralistic judgment. So you were good, so you deserve a cookie. You deserve a reward. Or you were bad, so you deserve to be punished.
Uh-huh.
You know, who deserves what? So this is where you see a lot of this, of course, in the parenting, authoritarian parenting, meme, but also a lot of work scenarios where you go in and a lot of really crappy bosses use this this methodology.
Yeah.
And it's just not very life-serving to think in these ways.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of studies have been done on intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation, and it's just in the moment you can get compliance, like and again in like the parenting scenario, or in schools. In the moment you can get compliance, you can get obedience via rewards and punishments. But if what you're wanting is long-term change, if what you're wanting them is to be intrinsically motivated, then they're extremely ineffective at getting that.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. Sorry.
So if you want your child to pick up their jacket because out of fear that you're going to punish them, you're going to take things away. Of course, if you punish them and maybe reward them when they don't put their jacket on the floor, when they put their jacket away, they're going to have that external one. But if you want their motivation to be, you know what, I really care about my father and I want him to be happy, and I want us to have a peaceful relationship together, and I want him to be effective at his job, and I can empathize with his situation. When he does something that I don't like, I want him to stop. So if I'm doing something that he doesn't like, I can really empathize with that. So if you want that to be the motivation to why your child puts their jacket up, punishments and rewards are a terrible way of getting that to be their motivation, of it to be intrinsic. In fact, it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to really push them away and make you the enemy.
Yeah.
Rather than being the friend that they want to help out.
Yeah. If the child throwing his jacket on the floor has had some education in logical fallacies and the parent is using fear, then he will just say, oh, you're throwing an adbaculum at me. This is not a good argument,
Right.
Yeah. All right, so we had 3 Ds now, right?
Sure. The other one is demands.
All right. Yeah.
And again, this implies the threat of punishment if you don't follow the demand.
Yeah. that doesn't work. So we should try to avoid those Ds.
Correct.
All right. Is there any other major point that we haven't discussed about nonviolent communication?
Probably, but I'm not thinking of one at this moment.
All right, no problem. Yeah, I really like having this interview. It's there's been a lot of positive and negative views on the internet about this.
Sure.
And, I have a little bit of trouble with it myself because the whole language in itself is troublesome for me. One of the arguments I bring up a lot of times is that 300 to 500 years ago, there weren't that many people that could read, right? And nowadays, literacy is, well, gone up, depending on which country, of course, but, most people can read. And I was like, well, how come, all of a sudden all of these people can read? Well, all of a sudden, it took a couple of hundred years, but still, in human history, that's just a snapshot, right?
Sure.
And I was thinking like, well, it can't be because the ruling class was so pitiful on us that they thought, oh, these poor peasants, they can't read, let's teach them how to read, right? I think it had more to do with controlling the people via language, right? Think of 1984 in the Newspeak dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, the whole idea of language is, to me, is kind of violent, so to speak, because it's being used to control people. Most people don't even think for themselves, and when they have conversations with other people, it's more like a program that they are running off than that they think for themselves even before they speak.
Sure.
So that's one of the problems that I have with the whole language thing. And then the idea of non-violent communication coming up, I was afraid, and still am a bit, I guess, that it's just another form of control, right? Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I know that there has been a series of podcasts on this where the Jan Irving, who is the host of Gnostic Media, has done some podcasts on nonviolent communication, saying that it is what's the term? I know he called it's mind control. It is there's a more technical term than mind control, but it's basically
neuro-linguistic programming.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. Neuro-linguistic programming. And that's what it is, and it's used to manipulate others.
Yeah.
My experience with nonviolent communication has not mapped up with that. I don't feel like it's manipulation at all.
Okay.
So it's just a way, I mean, if anything, I think things like what people normally do when their needs aren't getting met, like bickering and like things like using passive-aggressive behavior, that to me is much more manipulative than nonviolent communication, which to me nonviolent communication is very honest. You're really opening yourself up and saying, look, this is what I'm feeling right now, rather than, like the traditional passive-aggressive thing. What's wrong, honey? Nothing. So I don't see it. And School Sucks, the School Sucks project with Brett Venat did a counter set of, because it was actually that Gnostic Media was in response to an NVC and the Trivium podcast series done by Brett Venat and Daryl Becker, who we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
On School Sucks. Then Gnostic Media responded to it, and then School Sucks did a counter response. So if this is something that interests you, there's hours and hours of podcasts out there on the internet that you could listen to thoroughly going over this.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would really recommend it to anyone, because unless it's something that's just really, really interests you, the how could somebody think this is realistic programming or the like, or if you're concerned, like someone like yourself who's really concerned about it. But otherwise, I think you'd probably be bored out of your mind listening to the back and forth about this, because it's very long and detailed.
Yes.
But I guess if you want to know more, that's the place to go. So it's Gnostic Media and School Sucks Project.
Yeah. This is maybe a point we haven't discussed. The listenership that this radio station UCY.tv has is a group of people that would call themselves awake or aware, as opposed to the masses who we, quote unquote, call asleep.
Sure. I call it taking the red pill. You're no longer stuck in the matrix. That's the analogy I like.
That kind of idea.
Yes.
I'm thinking that this Mr. Rosenblum was the name, right?
Marshall Rosenberg, yes.
Rosenberg, all right, yeah. Was more targeting the normal people as how do I put this even in terms, right? People
still plugged into the matrix, the copper tops.
Plugged into the matrix. And so when this nonviolent communication hits the people that have taken the red pill, that have woken up from the matrix, you get a different reaction from them, right? It's a totally different world, right? So, yeah.
Sure.
Maybe it's not written for us. Could that be? I don't think so. Because when I look at what you've told me so far, it's very useful for a person in itself, like the Trivium. You can use it for yourself to clear your mind, to think correctly, right? But you can also use it as a shield, a kind of defense against the advertisements that are being thrown at you, against political speeches that are full of fallacies. Right? So that's one way. Another way to use it is for yourself, to clear your head of non-important information by sorting out the grammar first, right? And so I think that nonviolent communication can also be used just for yourself, and so that you can then approach people in a more friendly way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. I guess the part about the feelings is also what's being struggled with people that have taken the pill, is because they say, well, I don't care about other people's feelings. The truth is the truth, right? It's, reality sucks, get over it.
Sure.
Something like that, right?
Well, I mean, my response to that would be, what are you trying to get out of that exchange with that person? Are you wanting to convey to them what the truth is?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that they're going to actually hear it and not dismiss you? And if that's what your goal out of it is, then their feelings should matter to you, because their feelings are something. To ignore feelings, to me, is actually not very good use of the Trivium, because you're ignoring some of the grammar. I mean, grammar, another way of saying grammar is input.
Yeah, sure.
And human beings are emotional creatures.
Yeah.
So to ignore that piece of grammar, I think there's a lot of folly in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's correct. It's a part of the grammar. It's part of the building blocks that you should use when analyzing a situation. Yeah. All right. I guess I'm out of questions.
Yeah, we talked for some time, but this is really good. I thank you for having me on again, Walter. I really had a good time.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. I had a good time as well. I did clear up some of the things, and I'm less suspicious. Let's just put it that way.
Sure. Let me just put a plug in for one of my friends. His book that just came out It's called Complete Liberty Inside Out. It's by a gentleman named Wes Bertrand. I just did a book review on my podcast, Choice Conversations, a couple weeks ago. He is somebody who is absolutely unplugged from the Matrix, is fully on board with voluntarism, and he's also fully on board with nonviolent communication and self-knowledge. And he speaks in a language that I think can be easily heard by people that have already unplugged from the Matrix, because he has too. He's not going to say things that are inconsistent with people like us who see the contradictions in the institutions of statism and the like. He's well aware of them and acknowledges them. And so he can present NVC in a manner, and he does in his book, that is consistent with people that have unplugged and that are now awake. Yeah. So in the book, it's short, it's free. He has the PDF and I think EPUB available online. You can download for free. He read the book online if you prefer audio.
Okay.
So he read it on his podcast. He has a podcast, Complete Liberty. You just go to CompleteLiberty.com. His last few episodes were him reading the various chapters of his book. And then it's also on Audible.com. So if you're already an Audible user, you can go there and find Complete Liberty Inside Out. And that could be a way for you to get exposed to nonviolent communication spoken by somebody who's awakened. Because you're right, I don't believe that Marshall was awakened. I mean, he still was tied into the statist way of mind, and many people in the nonviolent communication are. They tend to be on the left, which for people that are libertarian-minded or voluntarist and the like, they tend to have a much harder time dealing with people that are on the left than they do on the right for some reason, even though they're both just two different flavors of domination. Yeah. But for whatever reason, they seem to be more open to talking with people on the right, and the right's arguments are less abhorrent to voluntarists and libertarians than the left's arguments are. So when the NVC is presented by these people that are largely on the left, it might rub people the wrong way, maybe because of that, because of their political views and the like. So, but here's somebody who is outside of that left-right paradigm. So I encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, it's CompleteLiberty.com.
Correct. And you can get his book there.
Yeah.
The audiobook, etc.
There's a welcome, there's a home. If you mouse over CL book, there's an audio book, PDF download. It says complete liberty means being able to make your own decisions with your own property while respecting others' rights to do the same. Unfortunately, our society has yet to fully integrate this political principle, so we suffer the assorted social consequences. That's how his website starts. It looks pretty slick, actually. There's a sun and the moon and the earth there. Yeah, looks good. That's okay. Any other plugs?
Just check out my podcast. I'd love for you to stop by and listen. And if you have some feedback on that, you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Choice Conversations Podcast on Facebook, and you can. That's the best way to contact me. You can post on my page there, and I'd love to hear from you and your listeners.
Yeah, Choice Conversations. If you type that in the Google, the top one is choiceconversations.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. That's the one, right?
You got it.
Yep. Right. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.
And good luck with your other podcasts and so.
Oh, thanks.
Take care and have a nice day for the rest.
Sure thing. You too.
Mine is almost ended, by the way. All right then. What's up, everybody? So that was an interview with Chris. And let's see. Is there still anybody left? Cracker, Dan, Hans Dietrich,
Jules, Mama Delight, Matty Clues, Tomato, and Vince. Welcome everybody. So, I think I mentioned it last week that, no, I guess I didn't even mention it, did I? That I found a more extensive list of fallacies. So a whole bunch of them here. And we're going to go through those, especially those that seem unfamiliar. And I guess I need to find my tobacco. Yay! There it is. And one of the first of them is ad fidencia, argumentum ad fidencia, also known as against self-confidence. Alright, never heard of this one before. And before we go into that, I'm going to make two of these so I can actually follow the chat. Also, put that up. Yay! Paste that there. Go. And then this one. Okay, this is the description of against self-confidence fallacy. Attacking the person's self-confidence in place of the argument or the evidence. Logical form. Person 1 claims that Y is true. But is person 1 really sure about that? Therefore, Y is false. Okay. Example 1. Rick. I had a dream last night that I won the lottery. I have 1,000 saved up, so I'm buying 1,000 tickets. Vic says, you know, dreams are not accurate ways to predict the future. They are simply the result of random neuron firings. Rick says, the last time I checked, you are no neurologist or psychologist. So how sure are you that I'm not seeing the future? And then Vic says, it's possible you can be seeing the future, I guess. Alright. It's kind of, is it an opposite? Oh, I don't know. This is a bit of a tough one, especially with psychologist named here, because you know, remember the appeal to authority, and you know how psychology lies in our field. It's got a really bad name because it's tied to mind control. Also, it's tied to social engineering, right? So when we say, well, you're not a psychologist, you know, it doesn't, that would speak for him, right? So, but is this kind of like a reverse or mirrored ad hominem? Right, so don't let yourself be slain away just because you're not an expert at something. Right, you don't need to be an expert to be awake, you know, or some people don't like that word, awake, to be aware. All right. It helps if you have a bit expertise in one field or another. Because you know all fields are infected, so to speak. So you know, that could be a starting point. It was for me. You know, I knew more about steel than I wanted to, And, that's how I knew that those buildings weren't going to disappear like that. And that led to the path that led me to claiming that I am aware. Right, that's about enough of that. Another example. Chris, you claim that you don't believe in the spirit world that is all around us, with spirits coming in and out of us all the time. Eek! How can you be sure this is not the case? Alright, so this one is false also because you're being asked to disprove something, right? How can you be sure this is not the case? Well, in fact, if you claim that there is a spirit world, then it is your responsibility to come up with the proof. Otherwise, the negative holds the field. Right? So Chris asked that question. Joe says, of course not. How can I be? And then Chris says, exactly. 1 point for me. Yeah, okay. Bad example, I guess. Explanation. This is a common fallacy among those who argue for the supernatural or anything else not falsifiable. Yeah. That one is still not super clear to me. Not falsifiable. Let's see. This one? No, this one. Back here. Here we go. If Joe was not that reasonable of a thinker, then he might start to question the validity of his position, not based on any new and counter evidence presented, but a direct attack on his self-confidence. Fortunately for Joe, he holds no dogmatic beliefs and is perfectly aware of the difference between possibilities and probabilities. Okay. I guess that's one we should discuss also, difference between possibilities and probabilities. And they look a lot alike in English. In Dutch they don't. Possibilities, dat zijn mogelijkheden. Mogen could tie to the word might. And then probabilities zijn I guess someone's waarschijnlijkheden. That is a totally different word. There's the word true in there. There's the word shine in there. And then the form of to be. So waar is true. Schijn is shine. And then tied to a word of to be. So it looks like that is a small contribution to trying to get the difference clear between the two. Exception for this fallacy. When one claims certainty for something where certainty is unknowable, it is your duty to point it out. Okay, tip. Have confidence that you are probably or even very probably right, but avoid dogmatic certainty at all costs in areas where certainty is unknowable. Alright? Good. Let's see. This will use more. Yay. Can we get it? Stupid frames. Hulk Rescue. Don't think we've done this one before. Also known as making stuff up. Description. Very often, We desperately want to be right and hold on to certain beliefs, despite any evidence presented to the contrary. As a result, we begin to make up excuses as to why our belief could still be true, and is still true, despite the fact that we have no real evidence for what we are making up. Right? It has the following logical form. Claim X is true because of evidence Y. Evidence Y is demonstrated not to be acceptable evidence. Therefore, it must be guess Z then, even though there is no evidence for guess Z. This is interesting because this ties exactly to the way scientists are treating gravity. Remember that story I told you about their calculations, and then they developed very accurate telescopes, and they were able to measure the speed of the stars around the center, and poof, there went their calculations, and all of a sudden they come up with dark matter and dark energy. Well, that must be Z then, right? Why don't you, go back to claim X, which is, this is gravity, their holy book, gravity. It's like a Bible to them. It's as thick as it too. Example 1. Frida, I just know that Raymond is just waiting to ask me out. And then Edna says he has been seeing Rose for 3 months now. And then Frida says he's just seeing her to make me jealous. And then Edna says they're engaged. And then Frida says, well, that's just his way of making sure I know about it. Interesting. Explanation. Besides being a bit deluded, poor Frida refuses to accept the evidence that leads to a truth she is not ready to accept. As a result, she creates an ad hoc reason in an attempt to rescue her initial claim. Okay. Example 2. Mark. The President of the United States of America is the worst president ever because unemployment has never been so bad before. Sam says, actually, it was worse in 1982 and far worse in the 1930s. Besides, the president might only be partly responsible for the economy during his term. And then Mark says, well, the president kicks animals when nobody is looking. Okay. Good example. Explanation. Out of desperation, Mark makes a claim about the president, his private treatment of animals after his original claim had been refuted. Exceptions or exception. Proposing possible solutions is perfectly acceptable when an argument is suggesting only a possible solution, especially in a hypothetical situation. For example, if there is no God, then life is meaningless. It's an interesting one. If there is no God who dictates meaning to our lives, perhaps we are truly free to find our own meaning. Alright. This is a tough one. If there is no God, then life is meaningless. In other words, what he's saying, because there's God, life has meaning. Well, that's kind of authoritarian, isn't it? There's this quote-unquote figure called God, and he's going to tell you what to do, because he's the one who implanted in you an idea about what the meaning of life is. right? Does anybody know, by the way? So this tells more about the view that people have about this God than about life being meaningless, right? I guess this is because they've not been exposed to the Indian philosophies that are out there, because they would never, a group of them anyway, would never make such a claim because they didn't personify nature's forces, like has been done the last couple of thousand years, right? But there was a large group of people, and there still is today, that think that there is no such person as God, and they view it more as a kind of energy, right? And they don't claim that this energy then is what gives life its meaning, because there is no higher authority, right, to bow to. Alright then. Tip for this fallacy: when you suspect people are just making stuff up, rather than providing evidence to support their claim, simply ask them, what evidence do you have to support that? Alright, that was ad hoc rescue. Now there's 4 kinds of ad hominem: abusive, circumstantial, guilt by association, and to quoque. It's probably French, to quoque. Let's take the last one, because we did the 3 like short ago. Argumentum ad hominem tu quoque, or something like that. Also known as you too fallacy, hypocrisy, personal inconsistency. Description: claiming the argument is flawed by pointing out that the one making the argument is not acting consistently with the claims of the argument. Yeah, it's hypocritical, but it doesn't disprove the argument. Logical form: person 1 is claiming that Y is true, but person 1 is acting as if Y is not true. Therefore, Y must not be true. Yeah, so watch out for that mistake. Example 1. Helga: you should not be eating that. It has been scientifically proven that eating fat burgers are no good for your health. And then Hugh says, you eat fat burgers all the time, so that can't be true. Explanation: it doesn't matter to the truth claim of the argument, at least, if Helga follows her own advice or not. While it might appear that the reason she does not follow her own advice is because she doesn't believe it's true, it could also be that those fat burgers are just too damn irresistible. Example 2. Jimmy Swaggart argued strongly against sexual immorality, yet he had several affairs with prostitutes, therefore sexual immorality is acceptable. Explanation: the fact Jimmy Swaggart likes to play a round of bedroom golf with some local entrepreneurial ladies is not evidence for sexual immorality in general, only that he is sexually immoral. Exception: if Jimbo insisted that his actions were in line with sexual morality, then it would be a very germane part of the argument. Tip: again, admit when your lack of self-control or willpower has nothing to do with the truth claim of the proposition. The following is what I remember my dad telling me about smoking. He smoked about 4 packs a day since he was 14. Bo, never be a stupid a-hole like me and start smoking. It's a disgusting habit that I know will eventually kill me. If you never start, you will never miss it. And then his dad dies, and he never touched a cigarette in my life and never planned to touch one. Alright, anti-smoking lobby probably pushed some money in here. Just kidding. Affirmative conclusion from a negative premise. Interesting. Negative premise. Also known as illicit negative. Drawing a negative conclusion from affirmative premises. Fallacy of negative premises. Interesting. This is our first fallacy in formal logic, out of about a dozen presented in this book. Right, so formal logic is a book. Formal fallacies can be confusing and complex, and are not as common in everyday situations. So please don't feel lost when reading through the formal fallacies. You do your best to understand them as I do, my best to make them understandable. New terminology. Should I say newspeak? Syllogism. An argument typically consisting of 3 parts. A major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. Yeah, that's what we have learned in the past. Categorical term. Right? Category. Usually expressed grammatically as a noun or noun phrase. Each categorical term designates a class of things. Alright? And then, we miss something here, and I know that we miss it because I came across this term via a course in logic, and it mentioned there that there are degrees of arguments, and that you can't mix them up, and it has to do with these categories of ideas. That's what it was called. It was categories of ideas, and one category of an idea is higher than another, and so if you mix them up, you're making a logical error. Right? So we haven't a clue still about what that actually is. What's the order in which the ideas are ranked, right? Alright, so that was categorical term. Next is categorical proposition. Joins together exactly 2 categorical terms and asserts that some relationship holds between the classes they designate. Okay. Categorical syllogism, an argument consisting of exactly 3 categorical propositions. Interesting. A major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion, in which there appear a total of exactly 3 categorical terms, each of which is used exactly twice. What? Description. The conclusion of a standard form categorical syllogism is affirmative, but at least one of the premises is negative. Any valid forms of categorical syllogisms that assert a negative premise must have a negative conclusion. Logical form. Any form of categorical syllogisms with an affirmative conclusion and at least one negative premise. Right? Explanation. In this case, the conclusion is obviously counterfactual, although both premises are true. Why? Oh, wait a minute, we missed an example. No people under the age of 66 are senior citizens. No senior citizens are children. Therefore, all people under the age of 66 are children. Explanation. In this case, the conclusion is obviously counterfactual, although both premises are true. Why? Because this is a categorical syllogism where we have one or more negative premises, i.e. no people, and no senior citizens, and we are attempting to draw a positive affirmative conclusion. All people. Right? Good example there. And an explanation. Example 2. No donkeys are fish. Some asses are donkeys, therefore some asses are fish. Explanation. There is a categorical syllogism where we have a single negative premise, i.e. no donkeys, and we are attempting to draw a positive affirmative conclusion, i.e. some asses. Right? And there's no exception to this. Nice one. Affirming a disjunct? What the heck is that? Hey, tomato. Affirming a disjunct, also known as the fallacy of alternative disjunct, false exclusionary disjunct. Affirming one disjunct. Alright, we're going to have to look up that word now, because, the fallacy of the alternative syllogism, asserting an alternative, improper disjunctive syllogism, blah blah. Fallacy of the disjunctive syllogism. Yeah, alright, so, disjunct. Let's put that into Google, see what we get. Copy. Paste. Disjunct. Each of the terms of a disjunctive proposition. Yeah, that's so nice, right? You look up a word and you get the same word back in explanation 1. If I knew what disjunctive was, I wouldn't have to look up disjunct, right? Christ. That's in logic. In 2, grammar, another term for sentence adverb. Alright, so we can at least look up that. That's as a noun, and then as an adjective, disjoint or distinct from one another. Yeah, things. People could be thinking of planets as well. They are in junction or not, coming together or not. Right, so disjunct would be not coming together, I guess, as an adjective. And a noun is a logic one we need to have. Each of the terms of a disjunctive proposition. Alright, let's see what we can get from the examples here. New terminology. There we go. Should have just read along. Disjunction. A proposition of the either-or form. I think we've had this one before. Which is true if one or both of its propositional components is true. Otherwise it is false. Yeah, disjunct. One of the propositional components of a disjunction. There we go. Description. Making the false assumption that when presented with an either-or possibility, that if one of the options is true, that the other one must be false. This is when the or is not specifically defined as being exclusive. This fallacy is similar to the unwarranted contrast fallacy. It has a logical form. Hold on, guys. Logical form is P or Q. Next, P. Then, therefore, not Q. Then it continues, P or Q, and then Q, and then therefore not P. Yeah, okay. Example 1. I can't stop eating these chocolates. Either I really love chocolate or I seriously lack willpower. I know I really hate chocolate, therefore I cannot lack willpower. Alright, that's indeed a good example. Explanation. Ignoring the possible false dilemma, the fact, because it's a false dilemma, right? It could have and love of chocolate and lack of willpower. Ignoring the possible false dilemma, the fact that one really loves chocolate does not automatically exclude the other possibility of lacking willpower. Yeah. Example 2. I am either going to bed or watching TV. I am exhausted, so I will go to bed. Therefore, I cannot watch TV. Explanation. It is logically and physically possible to go to bed and watch TV at the same time. I know that for a fact, as I do just about every night. The or does not logically exclude the option that is not chosen. Today is either Monday or Sunday. It is Monday, therefore it's not Sunday. In formal logic, the above is referred to as a valid disjunctive syllogism. Okay. We had that. Affirming the consequent. I think we've done that one. Let's do it anyway. Also known as converse error, fallacy of the consequent, asserting the consequent, affirmation of the consequent. There's a kind of circular reasoning or something. New terminology. Consequent. The propositional component of a conditional proposition whose truth is conditional. Or simply put, what comes up after the then in an if-then statement. Antecedent. The propositional component of a conditional proposition whose truth is the condition for the truth of the consequent. Or simply put, what comes after the if in an if-then statement. Description. An error in formal logic where it is the let's try this again. An error in formal logic where if the consequent is said to be true, the antecedent is said to be true as a result. Logical form. If P, then Q. Q happens, therefore P. Let's see. That I don't get at all. Premise 1. If P, then Q. Premise 2. Q. Conclusion, therefore P. No. Doesn't make any sense. Example 1. If taxes are lowered, I will have more money to spend. If I have more money to spend, no, not if, I have more money to spend, therefore taxes must have been lowered. Explanation. I could have had more money to spend simply because I gave up crack cocaine, prostitute solicitation, and baby seal clubbing expeditions? Example 2. If it's brown, flush it down. I flushed it down, therefore it was brown. Explanation. No, it did not have to follow the if it's yellow, let it mellow rule. In fact, if I did not follow the rule, I would probably still be single. The stated rule is simply if it's brown, then implied. From this, we cannot imply that we can only flush it down if it's brown. That is a mistake, a logical fallacy. No exceptions. Alright. Affirming the consequent. Alleged certainty, also known as assuming the conclusion, appeal to common sense, form of appeal to common sense. Description, asserting a conclusion without evidence or premises, through a statement that makes the conclusion appear certain when in fact it's not. Logical form, everybody knows that X is true, therefore X is true. Appeal to common practice or something, right? Example 1. People everywhere recognize the need to help the starving children of the world. Explanation. Actually, people everywhere don't recognize this. This may seem like common sense to those who make the claim, and to many who hear the claim, but there are many people on this earth who do not share that view and need to be convinced first. Really? Example 2. Everyone knows that without our culture's religion, we all would be like lost sheep. And then, interesting. Explanation. Everybody does not know that. Sometimes, without stepping outside your own social or cultural sphere, it might seem like what you might accept as universal truths are simply truths within your own social or cultural sphere. Don't assume universal truths. Oh, that's interesting. I'm kind of the opposite of that. You know. Something is true, then it has a tie to reality. And it's universal. If something is true for me here, then it's true for me everywhere, and true for everybody also. Something is not, true for Joe and not true for Jack. You see, it's universal. It's in that sense. Then of course, simply truths within your own social or cultural sphere, right? So, but then those are not truths, because that would mean that in other social or cultural spheres, it would not be accepted as true, because people don't see the truth of what you're proposing the truth is. So there's a problem right there with the definition of the word truth, because it's not how do you call that again? Subjective, right? What's true is for me is true for everybody. Otherwise, it's just my imagination.
Secrecy is repugnant.
An
open society.
Well, I guess we'll be back.
People, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths.
Thanks a lot for listening, everybody.
I think a new world order is emerging.
Dan, Hans, Joe, Jules, Matty, Popula.
Inside job.
Vince.
How
Bye-bye,
dare
everybody.
you. How dare you?
to create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of